This is Jill Pack with the Seasons of Joy podcast. This is episode number 103, entitled, That Time I Fell on My Face in New Zealand. Are you a woman of faith who is struggling to navigate your current season of life? Do you feel like life is just happening to you instead of for you? My name is Jill Pack, and I'm a certified faith-based life coach and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I want you to know that no matter your season or your circumstance, it is possible to create a more joyful life, and I would love to show you how. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the podcast this week. I am so glad you are here. I'm excited for today's episode because I have an interesting story to tell you about my most recent trip to New Zealand. But first, I wanted to talk about my upcoming workshop. Now, the registration for the Navigating Midlife with Grace workshop has been closed, and I really am excited and looking forward to this workshop and everything that we prepared for it. But if you weren't able to join us, if you weren't able to register for this in-person event, that is okay. There are more good things to come. First of all, next Wednesday, March 26th at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Savings Time, I'm going to be holding my monthly Ask Jill Anything call in my Seasons of Joy community. All you have to do to participate is to join my free Facebook group, Seasons of Joy Community. Once you join, you can either watch the live stream video of the call and ask questions via the comments, or you can click the Zoom link that is found at the top of the group page in the featured section and ask questions via chat, or you can come on live to get coached if you want. This is a great way to ask questions and to see what coaching is like with me. And I would love to have you join me. So just visit the show notes to find the link for that. Second, I'm going to be offering another session of the Season of Connection group coaching program beginning April 9th. This is an online group, and it's designed to show you how you can better create connection in your relationships. This group will be held on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 8 p.m. Monday Daylight Savings Time for 6 weeks. And when you join this group, you will receive a workbook and content videos where I teach you concepts and tools that you can begin applying to your own relationships. And then each week we will meet together over Zoom live for a group coaching call where you can ask questions about anything and get coaching and watch coaching. And I created this group as a safe and supportive space to learn, share, and grow. And if you're interested in participating in this next group, just visit the link found in my show notes. Or you can go to my website, www.seasons-coaching.com, and you just click on the Connection Group tab at the top of the page. But I wanted to share with you some things that people have said that have participated in this group in the past. Tony shared, this workshop was really good for me. When I signed up, I wasn't sure I could make the calls, but I made it work. I signed up with the intention to just listen to others being coached, but I ended up being coached a few times and I really liked it. It helped me really apply what I was learning into my own life. I liked that it was small, so I felt more comfortable being coached. And Kim said, I loved this Season of Connection group. It was so helpful to have the classes ahead of time and the workbook. I know when I did the work before the live class, it made all the difference. Jill offers all the information to work on our connections with people, but also gives us the tools to work it out on our own. Then in the live class, she was willing to answer any questions and then coach us through real life examples. This was so helpful to me to be coached and to watch others get coached. I really would love to do this again. So again, if you're interested in participating in this group, just visit my website, www.seasons-coaching.com, and click on the Connection Group tab at the top of the page. Now on to this week's episode. I recently returned from a trip to New Zealand with some of my family members. My husband and I and a couple of our children went to visit one of our sons and his girlfriend who have been living and working there for the last 5 or 6 months. It was a lot of fun. I will say the jet lag coming home was a little bit rough, but overall it was really a fun experience. We wish that more of our children could have come on this adventure with us, but as it goes, life happens, and sometimes we can't work that all out, but they were definitely missed. We have been planning and preparing for this vacation for quite some time. We got more and more excited the closer it came time to leave. Now, we have traveled quite a bit, but never quite as far away as this. In New Zealand, they are currently 5 hours behind us here in the Mountain Daylight Savings Time Zone, but it's tomorrow. So, for example, if it's 9 p.m. on March 19th, it's actually 4 p.m. on March 20th. Isn't that crazy? It's still a little hard for my brain to wrap around this idea. On our way there, we basically lost a day, and on our way home, we gained a day. New Zealand is a beautiful country. It is made up of a North and a South Island, and they refer to them as Northland and Southland. We spent our time in the south of the South Island. It has such a beautiful, diverse landscape there. Everything from dry fields and mountain ranges to lake towns to glaciers to fjords and subtropical rainforest. There are also no predators there, except they do have mosquitoes and these annoying flies called sandflies. They don't drink your blood like mosquitoes. They are smaller than a mosquito and they scratch your skin, which give you these little rashes that itch. There are currently more sheep than people there as well. We even went golfing at this small rural golf course called Terrace Golf Club, and it was on your honor, right? So you'd go and you'd pay in an envelope, in a self-pay envelope, and put it in a drop box, and then you could go golf. But that isn't the best part. We golfed alongside sheep. This course was basically a grazing field for sheep, hundreds of sheep, with the putting greens fenced off. So we would hit our ball down the rough fairway until we could hit it onto the green. And then we had to, once our balls were on the green, we would need to open up a gate to go and putt. It was hilarious. I have some great footage of the sheep just bounding around, and they'd stay in these little clusters, and it was fun to watch. We planned some exploring for the first few days of our trip. So after we arrived in New Zealand, we visited Queenstown, and we met up with our son and his girlfriend in the beautiful town of Tiano. While staying there, we spent time visiting places like Milford Sound, Doubtful Sound, the Big Chasm, and Marion Lake. They were amazing. At the end of our trip, we stayed in a town called Wanaka. This is where our son and his girlfriend have been living and working for these last few months. We hiked, we mountain biked, we cold plunged in lakes and the ocean. We sat in a sauna by a mountain lake. We ate hand pies, ice cream, and fresh salmon that we caught ourselves. We played card games. We watched a New Zealand-made movie in a theater with couches and hot, freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. In the middle of our trip, we went on a backpacking adventure on Stewart Island. And this island is just off of the South Island. We took an 8-passenger plane ride with all of us and all of our backpacking gear to get there. And this small island has about 300 to 400 full-time residents. It reminded me of a little coastal town in the U.S., and it's very green and lush because of all the rain it gets during the year. It was interesting preparing for this part of the trip because we had to pack for our sightseeing part of our adventure and our backpacking part of our adventure. This meant bringing a lot of things we normally wouldn't bring, like tents, sleeping bags, a water filter, first aid kits, right? It's also a different season in New Zealand. It's actually the beginning of fall there, so we had to plan for colder, rainier weather as well. In New Zealand, they refer to hiking trails as tracks. Instead of using the word hiking, they call hikes on the established trails walks or great walks, depending on the trail. If the trail is more technical and less established, it's called tramping. So we definitely did some walking and some tramping. The route we chose to walk or tramp is called the Rakiura Track. It is this loop that's just over 23 miles, and we decided to break this up over the course of 3 days. So we would hike a day, camp, hike a day, camp, and then hike out. So after we landed from our short plane ride, we took a cab to the trailhead, and we hiked along the shoreline for about 6 miles. The trail was nice and maintained and was surrounded by beautiful subtropical rainforest. That first night, we set up our camp right next to the beach of the Tasman Sea. It was incredible. Luckily, we were able to get our tent set up before a rainstorm hit. New Zealand also provides these two-sided shelters with a roof that people can use at these campsites. Inside of these shelters, there are available counters to prepare food and tables to eat or play games on. So we were able to eat dinner dry away from the rain. And the seashells there were amazing. Usually at the beaches I've been to, right, there's lots of shells, but they're battered and they're broken. It can be a challenge to actually find a fully intact shell. But at this beach, it was full of these totally intact shells. We filled our pockets with some to take home. We also heard the call of the kiwi bird at night while we were backpacking. Now, the kiwi is a rare nocturnal bird in New Zealand. Most people, even who live there, never actually see a kiwi bird. They actually sound like a mini T-Rex. The kiwi is one of New Zealand's many flightless birds. They don't need to fly because there weren't any land mammal predators before man arrived in New Zealand around 1,000 years ago. So they don't have wings. Kiwi call at night to mark their territory and to stay in touch with their mates. The best time to listen for a kiwi calling is on a moonless night, up to 2 hours after dark or just before dawn. That's when they stir from their burrows and they call out to their partners again or to mark their territory. But because kiwis don't fly, their feathers have also evolved into this unique texture to suit a ground-based lifestyle. And the kiwi has an extremely unusual beak. Not only does it provide, it's like this long, skinny, pointy thing. And interestingly enough, it looks super long, and you would think that it had the longest beak, one of the longest beaks. But it's actually considered one of the shortest beaks because it has sensory pits at the tip, and that's where the length of a beak is measured. And so that's why it's considered the shortest beak, even though it's long. But this beak allows them to sense their prey moving underground, the things that they eat. We never saw a kiwi bird on our backpacking adventure, but we most definitely heard them, and they do sound like a T-Rex. On the tracks, you also meet people from all over the world. We met Melody from Morocco, Benji from Texas, Sophie from Montreal, Reagan from Northland, New Zealand, Liz and Stuart from Australia, and more on our journey on the Rakiura Track. When we arrived at our campsite that first night on our backpacking portion, we visited with Melody and Benji underneath that protective shelter as we watched it rain. It was a fascinating visit. Melody and Benji were co-workers, and Melody had convinced Benji to go on this track adventure with her. They had decided to hike the track from the opposite direction than we did. And by the time we had connected with them, they had been hiking for 2 days through the muddiest part of the track and would be hiking out the rest of the way the next morning. We learned that Melody loved the adventure, and in her exploring, she had found lion's mane mushroom and pawpaw or a sea snail with a beautiful pearl shell. In visiting with Benji, we learned he didn't like the adventure at all. In fact, he said, I hated every minute of it. And he said, I didn't even see anything because I was staring at my feet the whole time, when he was referring to his hike to that point. Same circumstances, but totally different experiences. Interesting. As our Rakiura track adventure continued, this would become a family joke. I remember on the second day of hiking, we battled 9 miles of mostly muddy track. We had to watch where we stepped and figure out different routes to walk in the least amount of mud. We would joke how we hated every minute of it, or someone was being a Benji. Now, don't get me wrong, we liked Benji, and we all have Benji moments, right? The second day of muddy tramping was actually a big part of the adventure for us. We had fun, and we were lucky enough to have not much rain while we hiked over the 3 days of our backpacking. However, once we reached the campsite for our second night, the rain began as soon as our tents were set up. And it would come and go as we prepared dinner and we enjoyed a warm campfire. But just like the night before, the rainstorm became stronger as we headed to bed. We could hear the rain and the wind during the night. We knew that this would add to our muddy adventure the following day. The next morning, I woke up feeling particularly Benji-like. I was actually tired of sleeping on the ground and feeling wet and cold. We had gotten up especially earlier that morning so that we could get a good head start on our hike because we needed to make it back out of the trail or off the track in time to catch our plane off Stewart Island that afternoon so that we could continue on with our non-backpacking part of our trip. I was trying to get my stuff gathered together and roll up my sleeping bag so we could take down our tent, and I was struggling to find some of my things, and I was just feeling pretty grumpy. My husband and my daughter and I shared a tent, and they'd already gathered all their things, and they were underneath that shelter that I talked about, getting their backpacks ready as our other family members were, preparing to hike out. And I was grumbling to myself about hiking in the rain and not being able to find all of my stuff as I finished packing my things. And I remember complaining to myself and saying something like, well, I guess it was time for things not to work out. Something like that. I can't really remember, but basically it was a pity party. And I grabbed all my gear and I proceeded to climb out of the tent. But because it had been raining during the night, we had put on our rain fly. And this is like an outer tent, if you're not familiar, right? It's this outer tent in a way so that the regular tent is protected from the rain and it doesn't leak water inside. But because of this, there are 2 zipper doors that you have to go through, the tent door and the rain fly. So as I was trying to navigate the wet doors and my arms full of gear, one of my feet caught on the tent, and the next thing I knew, I was falling forward into the early morning darkness. And I landed right on my face, and my left hand bent backward a little bit, which is the hand that was recently broken and healed, and I began to cry. I knew that I had hit my face, but my wrist and my hand hurt worse. And I sat up, holding my wrist, crying, and trying to gain my bearings in the dark. My family came running over to me to see what had happened, because, of course, they heard me fall and my crying. And I remember hearing my daughter say, is there something we can use to wipe the blood off her face? Later, my son told me that when they got to me, my face and my teeth were covered with blood. They could see that I'd hit my face on the log in front of the tent, but they weren't sure if I'd bitten through my lip or knocked out some teeth. So they took me over to the shelter to lay down and make an assessment of my injuries. I was still afraid that I had re-broken my wrist, and they began cleaning me up the best they could, and they put a splint on my wrist. That is the great thing about having medically trained family members. They knew exactly what to do. The next thing I remember, I heard my son say something like, "Mom, I think that this would be a good reason to get you a ferry out if you want." And when people get hurt on the track, right, there really is a way to get help, kind of like we have search and rescue, right? You can call for help and get a ferry to the town that you hike out of. So it gets you off the trail. Because we had just spoken to someone the day before who had to get help for their dad who was injured. But as soon as my son said this, I said, "No, I'm not taking a ferry out of here. I'm going to hike out." And so my family just quickly divided up all my belongings into their packs to lighten my load. And after a few more minutes, I stood up and I put my pack on, and my family carried most of my things along with all of their things for 9 miles so that I could hike out with them. I looked like I had been in a fist fight. My head and my face, my mouth, my wrist hurt. My lip and my nose were swollen, and I had a bloody goose egg on my forehead, but I was able to hike out on my own. During the hike out, I had a lot of thoughts. I thought about how ironic it was that I was complaining right before I smashed my face. The humor of it was not lost on me. I also asked myself this question: would I have come on this backpacking trip knowing that I would fall and hit my face and hurt my wrist? I even asked my husband the same question as we were hiking. I thought about it a lot, and I came to this conclusion. Yes, I would. The mud, the rain, and my bloody face were part of the adventure. You could say they were the 50-50, right? Because there was also laughing, sandy beaches, subtropical rainforests, fern trees, moments of no rain, shelter from the rain, moving my body. My knee didn't hurt. My knee that I struggle with really did great. There were seashells and campfires and rivers. There was also an angry sea lion, but that's for another story. We met new people. We had plane rides. We heard kiwi bird calls. And my family came together to take care of me. If I knew that I would fall on my face, I would totally do it again to experience everything else. This is like life. There are some really sucky parts like rain, the mud, and getting hurt. But staying home or stepping out of life, we miss living. By embracing all of it, including the mud and the blood, we get to experience the beauty of the journey. Sometimes we're going to fall on our face. And when we do, we can cry and feel all the feels because it does hurt. Then we have a choice. Do we pull back because we're afraid of getting hurt? Or do we put our pack on and embrace the beauty of the journey? It really is a choice. Once I answered the question of whether or not I would go on the backpack knowing I would fall on my face, I actually started focusing on the tender mercies or beautiful coincidences. I didn't hurt my legs or my body in a way that made it so I couldn't finish the hike. And the longer I hiked, I could tell that my wrist wasn't broken. It just sprained. I didn't knock out any of my teeth, which is one of my greatest nightmares, or break my nose. I didn't hit the big tree with my face that was next to our tent. I didn't poke an eye out. I didn't break my fingers. I think that the way I landed on my hand did protect my previously broken scaphoid. I was able to spend 3 days hiking in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and it is that way because of the rain it receives. I could list more, but I won't. I joke about being a Benji, but there really is a lesson here. Do you want to live life hating every minute of it and just staring at your shoes so you can just get through it? Or do you want to look up and take in some of the scenery even though there is rain, mud, and blood? What are you going to choose? Thank you for tuning in to the Seasons of Joy podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends and family. If you want to learn more about me or how to work with me, just visit my website, www.seasons-coaching.com, and have a joyful week.